Hi there, I'm David Harvey, and I'm here with John Andrews, and this is the Two Texts Podcast. In this podcast, we're two friends in two different countries, here with you every 2 weeks, talking about two different texts from the Bible. In this season, as we enter our second year of podcasting together, we step beyond the stories of Jesus in the Gospels and into the book of Acts. The book of Acts is a series of stories and events from the early church when they encounter the disrupting presence of the Holy Spirit.
So David, last time we left the sort of what felt like quite a dark, cynical, cold moment where like Herod reaches out with the intent of persecuting some members of the church, but puts James, brother of John, to the sword. And it feels really almost matter of fact in the way that Luke described. And we reflected on the fact, wow, that just maybe Luke records it like that because he wants us to feel this sort of darkness and cynicism of this particular moment of a political pragmatist. But again, even within this passage in chapter 12, there's another gear shift. It moves again. And we move into an incredible story, a contrast story of the most profound level, it seems. We've just had the execution of the first apostle in James, and now we get this incredible story about Peter in prison and being rescued in prison. So shall we jump in, read that together and reflect on that?
Yes, let's do it. I'm going to read from chapter 12, verse 5 through to around about verse 19. And this will set up, again, an interesting contrast. We had this one sentence of James was put to death. And now we get this long focus on Peter, who goes to prison. But, well, let's see what happens. It says this. It says, "So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. 'Quick, get up,' he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, 'Put on your clothes and sandals,' and Peter did so. 'Wrap your cloak around you and follow me,' the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, 'Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen.' When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. People knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, 'Peter is at the door.' 'You're out of your mind,' they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, 'It must be his angel.' But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. 'Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this,' he said, and then he left for another place. In the morning, there was no small commotion amongst the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed."
Wow. I mean, to sort of probably get the awkward bit out of the way immediately, you're confronted immediately with a paradox of one apostle being executed,
Yes.
and the other one escaping or being helped to escape. And you go, whoa. And at one level. And what I love about how Dr. Luke writes this is he writes it in such a way that you're seeing the stark contrast. You can't avoid the fact, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
James gets killed. Peter gets a free pass. What's going on here? What on earth is happening?
And of course, it happens at Passover, where we remember from Luke that Jesus didn't get a free pass either, despite praying, "Take this cup from me."
That's right.
I mean, so the starkness of the contrast can be expanded, even, can't it?
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like Luke makes any attempt to explain that.
No.
It's just what it is, right? And we're sort of left. Oh, so pastorally, you're trying to sit down with John afterwards and trying to explain to John. Well, John, James, Peter, you are confronted with this mysterious, paradoxical moment that isn't explained, and we're just the two things are sitting side by side, and somehow I find, even without the explanation, I find some measure of comfort in that. I find, okay, here's a good moment, a celebratory moment. Everyone, Peter's got out of prison, and a terrible, dark and grievous moment. James is dead. And after we celebrate Peter getting out, we're going to bury James. So it's a moment, isn't it? And even at a pastoral level, wow, okay, can't explain that, but it just is the way it is.
I mean, even just to sort of bookend that, what do you make of the line in verse 17? Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this. Do you see that? And I don't know that I'd ever really noticed that before in my own kind of reading of the text. I mean, do you think that's? I mean, like I say, I just, as we were prepping for this particular recording, it struck me that you let me say this better than I'm currently failing to. When I was reading the text, it hit me again. There's parts of this remind me of reading like Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, right? The attention to detail and the contrast of James doesn't get rescued, and he gets one sentence. James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. Peter does get rescued. And we're getting right the way down to there was an iron gate leading to the city, and it opened for them. But, I mean, do you know what I mean? But I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say it reminds me of Lewis's writing in Narnia. But it's like very detailed, this story is. The length of one street. The angel tells him, wrap your cloak around you. The chains fell off the wrist. I mean, it's like a real attention to detail at this part of the story. Almost as if, I mean, but Peter is unaware of what's going on. And do we get to the end here? And is Peter now, I mean, I don't know. Is Peter now unaware of James's death at this point? Mm-hmm. You know, what do you take on that?
Yeah, I love that little thing at the end where he says, go and tell James. And then it seems that Peter then gets out as quickly as possible. So he takes the hint and heads for the hills, sort of thing. It's striking that he entrusts the story to Mary's household and maybe even to Mary herself, which again has a beautiful nuance there in terms of women being entrusted and part of the proclamation process. But also maybe we have this detail as a reminder, even though we've had this shocking execution of James, and where it seems the Lord did nothing. The detail of the story with Peter shows that the Lord is still at work, and the Lord is still rescuing, and the Lord is still able, even under the nose of Herod. I tell you where I saw a little contrast, David, which might be too much of a stretch. I noticed that when we were reading about Herod, it said that Herod mistreated or persecuted the church. And I noticed that actually Stephen used the same word of oppression or doing evil when speaking of Pharaoh in his defense. And Stephen says this in Acts 7. He said, he dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our forefathers. So if you go back to that amazing story, you have again the same tension. You have a tension of people suffering terribly and some of them even dying. And yet at the same time, a rescue, an Exodus rescue is literally in play. And a nation of people will come out of Egypt into freedom. And it feels like there's a similar vibe here in chapter 12. You've got the oppression of a king. He has, to some extent, been successful in that oppression. And yet the detail of the story is showing that God can, right under the nose of the oppression of that king, do something that is truly miraculous and other and supernatural. And is it not only a way of comforting us that even in the death of God's saints there's also deliverance, but also the fact of the detail of the story saying that God can do the miraculous even when it is completely impossible for him to achieve that. And somehow both ends of the story bring comfort in the context of both our suffering and our expectation of deliverance.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, I mean, these little threads that run through this are really interesting, where you see, exactly as you're saying, they're contrasted constantly with the one who we'll find out by the end of chapter 12 thinks he is a god, right? And I mean, you look at, he arbitrarily kills James. And then by the end of this story, he's arbitrarily killing his own guards. Yeah. There's all of these contrasts. I think Luke is brilliantly laying them next to each other. So you're in no doubt as to what Luke thinks is going on here. It's I like what you're saying there.
And the other thing I saw, just going back to James, which again, this is awkward. This is really awkward. When we saw the execution of Stephen, what Luke gave us was a magnificent after story. That even though this is a brutal execution, actually Luke's able to point to the fact something really amazing comes out of the death of Stephen. Yeah. When you're confronted with the death of James in chapter 12, nothing. He's just killed.
Yes.
And you get this sense of what seems to be senseless, purposeless, and it's not developed in any way. It just happens. And again, the sort of matter-of-factness of the early church almost taking in its stride the fact that martyrdom, persecution, suffering is, and I don't want this to sound glib, is sort of part of the package. It's part of the deal. We've been shocked by Stephen's execution. Now Luke just goes, yeah, and James was killed. And then we sort of move on into the next part of the story. And that sense that even we're not even given any something good's come out of that. It's just he's suffered and he's died. And that really does then show the other side of this, where God is at work, still growing his church, still protecting his people, but almost at the same time saying to us, but there will be cost, and there will be unexplained things, and there will be moments when we cannot square that circle. But the kingdom of God goes on, and the church goes on. And I know I'm struggling to explain that, but that sort of, that tension, that juxtaposition within the chapter is really dramatic and really, really deeply challenging.
And that's, I think that's worth thinking about throughout Acts. Even as we talked about in our last episode, there's all of this stuff going on. All of these things have happened to key characters in this story. Caiaphas, Pilate, and Luke's not telling us about any of these things. It's like he has the things that he wants us to understand, and he has the things that clearly he either assumes we understand or assumes that they're not actually that important to the story that he's telling. I think it's a beautiful contrast of the story of the kingdom of God versus history, and that does leave you in these sort of moments here where it feels almost just matter of fact this story about James, the brother of John. And I was teasing around with this just earlier, John, and let me just circle back to it for a second. But part of the reason I wanted to mention it is, what does Peter think is going on here with the various Jameses? Is I think it's worth just being alert when you read Luke and Luke Acts. There's quite a few Jameses floating around, and I just wanted to sort of draw it to that. It's that when Luke tells you, Peter at the end says, "Tell James and the other brothers and sisters." I think who have you got in there? You've got James, the son of John. So this is one of the brothers of Zebedee, isn't it? That we would know. There's also James, the son of Alphaeus, appears. There's a James, the father of Judas. And then there's James, the son of Mary, who is also known as the brother of Jesus, which he's never described as in Acts as the brother of Jesus. He just seems to be the only James that's just referred to as James. So, which probably isn't that surprising to us, that if you're Jesus' brother, you're the one that gets just to be James. Yeah. All the other Jameses, we're going to have to put a little bit of a detail on them. And well, you and me have both got common names as Johns and Davids, so we are used to our whole life somebody adding some other descriptor to who we are.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating that even to this here, Luke holds to that without any great sense of needing to clarify that sort of thing. But it's still significant. I mean, this is James, the son of Zebedee. Is a big character in the Christian story, and just sort of moved out.
Of course, we're sort of reminded of that incredible conversation that James, his brother, and their mother has with Jesus when she and they are angling for the best seats in the kingdom. And Jesus it's a moment where Jesus said, well, it's not for me to give the seats, but are you willing to drink the cup that I'm going to drink? And that without hesitation, it seems they go, yeah, we are. And here's James, it seems at some level, literally drinking that cup. Now we know that John, his brother, doesn't die strictly a martyr's death, but the level of suffering that John goes through is simply colossal. Yeah. And all of that original 12, with the exception of Judas, of course, and the exception of John, are executed. They do end in violent deaths and in dying for the kingdom and dying for the cause. And it just struck me in reflecting on James. Luke makes no explanation, and pastorally, David, I don't know if you've discovered this. I don't want us to go somewhere we don't want to go on this, but pastorally, sometimes there's just no answer. Pastorally, sometimes, okay, Luke, I don't know what that is. I can't explain that to you. To try and explain that to you will feel really crass, so I'm not going to explain it to you. Well, why did Peter get released in James? I don't know. So you just have to put that down to a sovereign, providential plan of heaven that will ultimately work things for its glory, and even within that for our good. But there's some things I just can't explain. And James gets taken out, and I'm not even sure why in that context, but it's there. And it reminds us that for the early church, death and persecution was a constant threat, and something that was almost on the induction package when you joined. Okay, yeah, eternal life, check. Holy Spirit, check. Going to heaven, check. Oh, possible martyrdom and definite persecution, check. These are things that were sort of on the induction list. And the early church for hundreds of years experienced that reality.
Well, and in parts of the world today still, doesn't it? And
still does.
I like what you're saying there a lot. I think it's really important pastoral advice to sometimes note that, well, number one, even if we could discover the why, it rarely brings comfort to us. But also, I think that making the why and the logic and the reason a primary concern as a pastor to explain death, I think can be hugely hurtful and actually quite damaging to people And also, I think at a theological level, evil and chaos are very similar things. I've been reflecting a lot in other study I've been working on at the minute, John, about how the creation story begins with God bringing order to chaos.
To chaos.
And the moment that sin joins with, the moment the humans start listening to something other than God, and we end up with the humans moving into a world of which we understand becomes a world of sin, what you see is the re-entry of chaos. You look at how this good garden becomes chaotic all of a sudden. And I think there's a human desire for logic and sense, and a need for us to confess pastorally that death is part of the chaos. And if we go looking for sense in death, we're trying to look for the wrong thing in the wrong places. I mean, I don't feel like I'm probably off the cuff describing that as sensitively as I should be, but I think we should resist. Here's what I have in mind. I had a conversation with a young person just recently, and I realized that as I get older, what I define a young person is a very different thing. But I mean a teenager who is talking to me about a loss of one of their parents. And I'm stood there, John, having this conversation thinking, like, goodness me, like both my parents are still with me. Like, you've lost a parent, your parents, John, but they lived long, good. I'm standing talking to a teenager, right? And I don't wish to be disrespectful to your story, John, when I say that, but like I'm standing with a teenager, and he's asking me theological questions about this, and when I felt myself, I said to this young man, I said to him, I just want you to hear something. I said, God's not happy about any of this. Right? This is not God's plan, and please don't let anybody ever tell you that your loss was God's plan. Right? This is, God's plan is life and goodness and wholeness, and we know this through the Easter story, right? But so many people are looking for, we must make sense of this so that this young person can say, it's all okay. But we do this horrible tragedy then by saying to young people or any person suffering extreme loss as if, this is what God wanted. And I always feel like saying, go read the Genesis story. This is not what God wanted. This is the furthest thing from what God wanted. And the cross and resurrection shows us that God doesn't want this. So perhaps I'm not being helpful with following up from what you were saying, John. But for me, I think that death and evil will always feel chaotic because they are, and God is pushing against them, and we have to accept aspects of that every one of us will die, but that ultimately God has something beyond this, and let's not do more damage to people in the short term by trying to help them get out of their sadness by making out like it's okay. God wanted it to be like this. I mean, am I making sense there, John?
No. Well, it makes total sense to me, and I think what I hear from you is that let's resist the glibness, let's resist the easy, superficial answer. This is God. Luke doesn't reach for this here.
Nope.
Luke just tells us Herod reached out and killed James. And there's no explanation. There's no, this is because, and this is what came out of it. We just get the tragic, terrible, chaotic, dark, cynical moment of which now the church feels the impact of that. And I think we must resist reaching for the superficial answer, which may not actually be a helpful answer at all. And it seems that an example like this shows us that the church had to just accept and confront certain things, that it could never explain this side of eternity, but we've got to get on and keep going and keep. And I love the way Luke brings the contrast here, David. You get this incredible moment, or you get this incredible sense of Herod's power. He reaches out, he grabs, he persecutes, he kills. Then he takes Peter, and then he puts Peter in prison, surrounded by 16 soldiers. So you're getting an incredible sense of power here probably four squads of four soldiers, each of them looking after the different watches of the night. So this is a man now, a single individual, not a military commander. He's not a strategist. He's not a terrorist. This is a religious figure under guard 24/7 from 16 soldiers. And up to that point, you get the sense of, my goodness, his power is absolute. His power is unchallenged. He has all this power to kill, to persecute, and now to imprison. And there is no way that Peter is getting out of this. And in verse 7 tells us, suddenly an angel of the Lord appears. So you get this, again, I love the way Dr. Luke is writing this, that if you look on the surface of it, there is no way we can resist Rome. There is no way we can resist Herod. There is no way that the church can withstand this level of persecution. And then suddenly an angel of the Lord appears. And it's the little reminder in the story. And maybe this is the part of the point of it, the reminder in the story. Actually, no matter how dynamic Herod is, no matter how high his wall, no matter how many soldiers he has, no matter how many chains he puts on your feet, there is always the possibility of a suddenly in God. That God can do a suddenly, which is just above and beyond anything that we've seen before, even in the light of James being executed. And I love that little reminder, hey, Herod is not in charge. It looks like he is, but he's actually not.
Well, it's it's not lost on me that, again, I keep looking ahead to this as to when we get to the story at the end of this chapter, you realize how not in control Herod is. But I think it's interesting to your point that you've got, this beautifully articulate story. There's four squads of four soldiers. Now we're binding Peter up. He's literally sleeping between two soldiers. But I started to think, is the telling of this story intentionally alluding to all sorts of different things? And maybe I'm just having fun here, John, with it. But so Peter's in prison. The church is earnestly praying for him. He's between two soldiers. So, and because I found myself on this track of I'm thinking about this is all happening at Passover. Jesus' death is at Passover. Jesus is between two thieves. There's that sort of imagery. And not all of this is just, I think it's curia in that sense. He's bound with two chains. So I was thinking about that. Then we've got sentries standing guard at the entrance. That reminds me of the tomb, of people guarding the tomb. But then even just with our conversation that we were having just a moment ago about chaos and order, this is all happening around a trial, which again seems to be a Passover theme. Interestingly, by the way, James doesn't get a trial as far as we're aware in this. But then there's this angel of the Lord, another kind of interesting theme at this point, and a light shining in the cell. I love this notion of light breaking into the darkness. So there's almost like creation themes going on here. That there's chaos and Peter appears out of control, and then light comes in. And I don't know. I just found and even just language about get up, take your cloak. Follow me starts to sound like Jesus in his healing miracles, doesn't it? I'm just having fun here, but there's so many interconnected ideas.
No, and the one I thought you were going to, which I thought was definitely I thought, is this a stretch? But I'll show it anyway. It's not only is there strong Passover thing, but I think there's a bit of a resurrection vibe going on there as well. So you get this quick rise up, get up language, and his chains fall off. And then I love this. The angel, verse 8 says, "Put on your clothes and sandals and wrap your cloak round you and follow me." Now, this is really strange. It's like the angel is saying, just reminding Peter, by the way, get dressed, sort yourself out. But then, David, honestly, I had a moment, and you know where your brain leaps to something and you go, no, that can't be connected. But I'll throw it out there. Our listeners are now well used to these random bits and pieces that we do. When the angel says to Peter, put on your clothes and your sandals and wrap your cloak around you, I was reminded immediately of the post-resurrection story of Jesus and Peter on the beach. And they're getting into, after they do the Peter, do you love me bit, they get into a little bit of detail about Peter's demise. And listen to these words. This is Jesus speaking. You will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you, and they will lead you to where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. So I'm looking at that and I'm just wondering, right? Peter is sleeping between the two soldiers. Does Peter think, James is done, I'm done? Okay, there's no point worrying about it. I'm going to die. This is what's going to happen. And almost Peter has given himself that he's about to die. And yet the angel of the Lord comes, and there is this, without stretching it too far, this resurrection moment, this release moment, the light into the darkness, this resurrection moment. And then, as if to absolutely say to Peter, you're not going to die, he says to Peter, dress yourself, put your sandals on. Because Jesus hinted very strongly, when your moment of death comes, someone else will dress you, someone else will lead you, someone else will sort of take control of this. And here's Peter being allowed to dress himself. And then you get this lovely link to John 21, the final words of Jesus, follow me, and the final words of the angel to Peter, follow me. And you get this gorgeous connection. Now, me and you could have just had too much pizza last night and we're just getting far too excited about things that aren't there. But at the very least, there are beautiful echoes and nuances here that are deeply providential, and they are connecting big stories and showing us that even when Jesus died on the cross and it looked like everything was finished, God was at work and the resurrection was coming. When it looks here like Herod is in control and he's got the whole of the city locked down and the church is under his boot, the angel of the Lord shows up and a resurrection moment takes place. And God shows, no, I'm still at work and I'm still doing what I need to do.
Oh, I love it, John. I love it. I mean, and I think that at some level, what we're seeing in this passage, and there's so much attention to detail, the iron gate and the first and second guards, it strikes me that there's a lot of imagery going on here that's very, very intentional. I was thinking it's interesting, isn't it? How it's like quick, get up, like it's like be resurrected with haste is another way you could translate that passage. Yeah. So it's hard to believe that in a movement like early Christianity, be raised with haste doesn't at least kind of make you think about the resurrection, the light shining in the cell. Again, interesting what's going on there. But of course, angel it's a messenger of the Lord. Like angelos is just a transliteration, really, of the word messenger. Is it overly surprising to us that messengers of the Lord sound like the Lord? They say the sort of things that you're remembering the Lord saying. I was looking when you were talking in John 21, bearing in mind, just before the interaction that you've just mentioned, Peter had taken his clothes off. And then when he sees it's Jesus, he wraps his outer garment around himself and jumps into the water. So there's the kind of notion of Peter's dress and what he's wearing and following are there in this story. And if these are stories that are well told of Peter, it's not surprising that Luke might be picking up on them and enjoying them. And I love the fact as well that following all of that on, I love the Greek of it. We translate it, Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. And that I just love the nature of the Greek, that he did not know that what was happening was true. I don't know why, I just like that. I like that notion of, you're in the midst of something true here, Peter. You know what I mean? It's this is actually going on around about you. It's quite, and then you get this beautiful line: the Lord has sent his messenger and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything these Jewish people were hoping would happen to me. It's really quite a fascinating piece of text there, isn't it?
It is, and again, I think the way Luke writes it reminds us that when death seems to reign, there is a God of resurrection at work. That when power seems to have its way, God is able to invade a prison cell. He's able to break chains, and he's able to rescue. And as the church continues to expand, they have to remember that there will be losses. There will be moments when a James and people like them will lose their lives for the cause of the kingdom. But that even in the darkness of a prison cell, light shines, the angel of the Lord appears, and resurrection life continues to grow.
And of course, as we bring that to an end, John, it's then more humorous, perhaps, that in all of the profundity of this moment, Peter is going to come to the people who are praying for him and maybe not get exactly what he expects. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed it. If you want to get in touch with either of us about something we said, you can reach out to us on podcast@twotext.com or by liking and following the Two Text Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you really did enjoy the episode, then we'd love it if you left a review or a comment where you're listening from. And if you really enjoyed this episode, why not share it with a friend? Don't forget that you can listen to all of our podcasts from this season and others at www.twotext.com. But that is it for now. So until next time, goodbye.